Welcome to the Jamie Ivey Show. I'm your host, Jamie, and today I sit down with my friend Holly Hayes, and her story has God's redemption plan written all over it. Holly, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jamie. This is great.
This is really great. This is really great. You're my friend. We live in the same neighborhood.
We do this often.
Which is crazy, But one of my favorite things about you is what you've started and what you're running and what you're doing, Sanctuary Project. Tell me a little bit about Sanctuary Project and then why this mission?
Yeah, so Sanctuary Project is a survivor-run nonprofit organization that employs and empowers women coming out of trafficking, violence, and addiction. We have a jewelry line, so all the jewelry I'm wearing, all the jewelry you're wearing today, I mean, she had to because I was here.
I know, yeah.
But we, so we work with women coming out of trafficking. I'm a survivor myself. I came out of that life about 20 years ago. It'll be 20 years in February. And
congratulations.
Thank you.
20
Isn't it amazing?
years.
I'm going to Disneyland, literally.
To celebrate?
Yes.
I'm so happy for you. I'm so happy, yes.
And that's 20 years of sobriety and 20 years out of that trafficking situation, 20 years of a new life in Christ. I didn't know Jesus right away when that happened, but found Jesus in the course of that recovery journey. And so over the course of those years, I've mentored a lot of women who also were coming out of that life. And I noticed again and again a common theme in the transitioning in work. It's such a challenge when your sexuality has been linked to your work to then go and try to find a normal job, right? To then go and try to work at Taco Bell or work in retail when everything about your work life has been associated with exploitation and pain and trauma. And so over the years of mentoring women, I really started to dream of building a place where I could be a safe harbor, a company where we could give women a second chance, a place where women can cry at work. We like to say you can cry at work. And just to build this place where women can rebuild their identity and do that in community with other survivors. So we're an entirely survivor-led organization. Everyone from our social media girl to our operations, me at the top as the CEO, our office manager, our program director, every single person on our staff is a survivor, which is really incredible.
It's so great. And I can't get over that you're going to Disneyland. I love it so much. You know, I had never thought about what you just said, though, that so many women who have come out of trafficking would associate sexual exploitation with their work.
Yeah.
I remember when you and I both served together volunteered at our local county jail, and we would often talk to the women about how hard it is to find, like, I don't want to use like real jobs, but like jobs that are legal.
Yeah, legal jobs. That's
legal
a good way
jobs,
to put it.
You know, because there's so much more profitability sometimes.
Absolutely.
In jobs that are damaging to your soul, your heart, your body, all the things.
Well, it's high risk and sometimes high reward, right? And so, you know, my first job was actually as a drug dealer. And
after trafficking, or your first job ever?
This was before I was even trafficked.
Okay.
And after that I was a stripper. But when I was a drug dealer, I made really good money.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot about business, which was kind of funny. I mean,
now you're running a business.
It's really funny. And we have all these little, like, we put jewelry in little dime bags. Like,
you're like, I feel like I've done this before.
Yeah, we have like gram scales setting out to weigh jewelry, and we're like, this looks familiar.
Yeah.
But I made really good money from a very young age. And so I associated myself, it almost created a sense of self-esteem or self-worth that I had made so much money, right? And so I had this connection to work where it was like, I know I'm capable, I know I'm smart, I know I see margins, I know I understand customer service. And you know, and then I went and became a stripper and then was trafficked. And at this, you know, even though I was being exploited and the money was being taken from me, I still had that feeling that I was earning for myself. And it was almost, I was told it was empowering even, you know?
Right.
And so there was almost this downgrade that had to happen, which is really terrible,
it's terrible.
Right? Going from being trafficked to then all of a sudden making less money when I wanted to start getting legal jobs and doing things that were legal, because then I had a criminal record at that point. I had dropped out of high school, so I had none of the skills or the assets
to go get a job that you would make the same amount that you were. So when you're employing women, it feels like a lot of your kind of what you want to do and mentor them is to give them dignity in the work that they're doing. Because
absolutely.
how do you give them dignity if they're feeling the same thing you felt
Yeah.
all those years ago of like, I could do this and make this much money, or I could do this and golly, I don't make as much money. How does a woman find dignity in that?
I think so much of it for us has been reclaiming that sense of femininity and beauty. And so what we create is intentional. You know, we could, my first job in recovery was shining shoes. And I loved shining shoes because all day long I was taking something dirty and I was making it beautiful. And that's what we do at Sanctuary Project. All day long, the girls are working with beautiful things.
Yeah.
All day long, they're touching, they're handling, they're creating beautiful jewelry. And so all day long, the message they're getting, whether it's conscious or subconscious, is I make beautiful things. I make beautiful things. I make beautiful things. And so taking them from, you know, we pay them pretty well. They're not, you know, we're a nonprofit, so we can't, I wish we could pay them more. Shop Sanctuary Project, so we can pay them more. But we pay them well, you know, they're paid above minimum wage. And, you know, and our women in leadership, in the Survivor Leader Program are paid pretty well. But ultimately, it's more about that community and that sense of value and self-worth of we make beautiful things together all day long, every day.
You said it was shoe shining for you.
It was shoe shining for me.
And for some of these girls, it's making jewelry.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you see a girl who comes in and works with you guys and she starts making beautiful things, you see a transformation.
Instantly. My favorite thing is every single girl, when she starts, and our girls usually start in our job training program, which is 8 hours a week, and every single girl will come in and say, well, I'm not really into like jewelry. I'm not like a girly girl like that. And we're like, okay, that's fine. Like, you know, but then after about a week or so, she's like, I do really like this one necklace. I do like this piece, maybe. And they get a really hefty discount. And so they'll save their money and you know, and then I'll watch them buy their first piece, and then they'll start wearing it every day. And then they'll start dressing a little bit, you know, a little bit nicer. And then they'll buy their second piece. And by the time they've been working for us for a year, I mean, all the girls look like me. They're all in dresses. They're decked out in jewelry. They're like, they are their full feminine selves. And that's an external transformation that mirrors what's happening on the inside. Because what's happening on the inside is all of a sudden they feel safe. All of a sudden they feel safe enough to be a woman. I mean, when you've been exploited all day long, every day, like this part of your femininity has to shut down, because if you look soft, you're gonna get hurt, right? And we see those girls like in the jail. If you're soft there, you're gonna get hurt. And that's not a world where you're allowed to be soft. And so for the first time, they're allowed to be soft. And their hearts start to soften, and their appearance starts to soften, and their soul starts to soften. And now I have a bunch of soft ladies, you know, working for me. And it's such a joy. It's such a joy to see that.
You know, sex trafficking is something that was brought to my attention, I don't know, 10 years ago. And I was one of those people that assumed that sex trafficking was in Thailand, South,
over there.
And it still is, obviously.
Absolutely.
But it's here as well. And you yourself were a victim of trafficking. How are ways that just anyone watching, I mean, obviously Shop Sanctuary Project, that is the helpful thing. But in all reality, what are like some everyday things that us women, we can link arms together to try to, can we spot trafficking? What can we do to help? How can we be a part of the solution for what's happening?
Yeah, you know, like you, I thought it was an over there problem. I was even trafficked and thought it was an over there problem.
Well, you know, when we would do our thing in the jail and we would go through that week, there would always be a woman in there who would go, that happened to me and I didn't know it.
Yes, and that was my story too. In fact, I even started, when I first heard about trafficking, my heart broke and I was like, oh, those poor girls. And I went over to Thailand and I volunteered with organizations in Thailand, and I was like, well, I'm a former sex worker, I'm a former prostitute, so I understand what they're going through, but these poor girls, I mean, I chose it, right?
Right.
And you know, it took years for me to start to unpack that I didn't choose this.
You didn't choose anything.
You know, I was absolutely exploited. For me, it was by a boyfriend, which is very common in the United States. And it just looked different. And so I think what we have to understand here in the US is that trafficking is very real. It's happening in every single city in America. There's nowhere that's immune to it. If there are people that will buy sex, there are girls being trafficked. And, you know, and it looks different here in America. Oftentimes it's the boyfriend or it's a family member. And so if you're a mama, I would say be watching what your kids are doing online. That is the number one place we're seeing girls being trafficked from. You don't have to kidnap girls anymore. Yep. You just go into Snapchat or TikTok and see who's out there trying to get attention, and then that trafficker will develop a relationship with her, become the boyfriend. So watch what your kids are doing online. Know the boyfriend. Yeah. Know who the boyfriend is. Everyone in my life knew that man was no good. And yet, they didn't even know how bad it was. Right. They didn't even know what was actually going on. But get to know the boyfriend. Make sure you're watching everything they're doing online, because that is absolutely where traffickers are targeting. Yeah.
I would say just educate yourself.
Yeah.
Just the knowledge of this is happening in my city. That is a good place to start, to know and be aware of what's happening. Holly, this is so great. All right, guys, we're going to come back with Holly in just a minute, and we're going to have a conversation about something that you're going to want to come back for. Able is an ethical fashion brand that employs and empowers women as a way to end the cycle of poverty. It started with scarves years ago, and now it's an entire fashion brand, and I am so grateful that Able has dressed me from head to toe for this Jamie Ivey Show. I would love for you to see all my favorites. Go to jamieivey.com/Able to see everything I'm loving at Able right now. Okay, guys, welcome back. I'm still here with my friend Holly Hayes, and we were just talking about her wonderful organization, Sanctuary Project. And Holly, the reason that we met was you were a guest on the podcast that I host, and you came to my house and we had an interview. And actually, you may not know this, but I reference you all the time. I give you credit, but I reference you, and I tell people that we had a conversation about abortion. And we talked about how you experienced walking into an abortion clinic and the chanters, the picketers yelling at you, nasty things, all the things that you would imagine. And then after you had an abortion, you left out the back door. And here's what you said. You said, "Where were the backdoor Christians?"
Yeah.
And I've never forgotten that. I've used that and thought about that all the time. And so I want to ask you, you and I are both people of faith. We're both Christians.
Yeah.
What are you doing to protect life? Sanctity of life, pro-life. What does that look like for you in the work you do, in the life you've lived, all of those things?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I had 5 abortions in the years that I was being exploited and in abusive relationships and addicted to drugs. And in every single situation, I felt like I had no other choice. And part of that might have been that I grew up in this liberal home where I was taught that abortion was a good thing. Not that it's good to be killing babies, but that abortion was a good thing because there were so many unwanted babies in the system already. And until that issue was dealt with, until all the drug babies were adopted, until every single child was adopted out of foster care, it would be irresponsible for someone to bring another unwanted baby into the world. And so when I got pregnant, the first time I got pregnant, I was 16 years old. It was from my meth dealer. Great guy. Yeah. Stand-up dude. And I was a child. I was a child. And I was doing drugs at the time. I was addicted to meth at the time. I didn't find out I was pregnant until I was about 10 or 12 weeks along. So I knew it was going to be a drug baby. And so I really felt like this was the only choice I had. Like, I didn't feel like there was any responsible part of me that could keep that baby and raise that child.
And because of the worldview that you had grown up in.
Yeah. And so it felt very natural for me to have had an abortion. My parents knew I was having an abortion. There was no shame around it because I didn't grow up in a Christian home, so there wasn't that value around the protection of the sanctity of life. All kinds of things went wrong in that I now understand, where I was lied to at Planned Parenthood about the gestational age of my baby, about its life stage, about whether it had a heartbeat or not. I mean, I was told it was just a clump of cells. And now that I have a baby of my own, I know at 10 weeks, 12 weeks, that's not a clump of cells, right?
Yeah.
So there are things I understand now that I didn't understand at that time. But at the time, I really felt like I was doing
the right thing.
The right thing.
And your only thing.
And the only thing. And so I think what's interesting is I have such a different perspective probably on abortion than a lot of Christians. Because what I find often in the Christian world is that there's a lot of focus on saving babies, right? The pro-life movement is all about stopping abortion, overturning Roe versus Wade, and end abortion in our lifetime. Those are those are kind of the talking points, and we vote accordingly, and we picket accordingly, and we make all of our decisions politically accordingly, right? I mean, that's like what you're supposed to do as a good Christian. And there's nothing wrong with that, because life is sacred and it does need to be protected. And, after many years, I actually realized, once I was in Christ, I actually many years later realized, oh my gosh, that was murder.
Yeah.
Those were lives. Yeah. Those were humans. They're with Jesus. He's showed me them. I know their names. I get to visit them in meditation and pray with him. And I know one day I'll hold them. And so life is sacred, right? But I think I have such a different perspective on it because I have to walk through this with a lot of my girls too. Yeah. There's been 3 girls that have come to me pregnant, come to Sanctuary Project pregnant.
To work.
Yeah. 2 of them have chosen not life.
Okay.
And one of them did choose life for that child. And in all 3 cases, they were pregnant with a tricks baby. They were pregnant, from someone who bought sex from them, so they didn't know who the father was, right? Yeah. And so in all 3 cases, there was fear. There was sometimes drug use. There was, what kind of father is this? I don't even know who the father is, and what kind of genetics is this child going to have because this father is someone who bought sex from a trafficked girl. I mean,
so much uncertainty.
All very real, heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching kind of things that they're having to walk through. It's funny, when we had that conversation, I had not had to be a backdoor Christian to the degree I've had to since in the last 3 years.
Wow.
I have had to walk it out.
Wow.
I've had to walk it out, and I've had to love girls, making that choice and being pregnant myself and having them make that choice and not being able to stop it because I can't control another person. Right. And, we offered them all the resources in the world, but they still felt like, I can't bring an unwanted baby into this world. That same worldview I had, right? I can't bring another unwanted baby into this world. I can't bring another drug baby into this world. I can't bring the baby of a trick into this world. And so it's been a really interesting journey of having to walk it out, right? And to see the abortion conversation from a very non-political, real life perspective of like, what does it look like for us to actually start talking about life being sacred? What does it look like for us as Christians? Because we have to live differently. We can't just vote differently.
Right.
Like we actually have to live in a way that says like, I am going to raise your child. I'm going to raise your drug baby. I'm going to raise your foster child. I'm going to raise a baby that is half traffic girl and half trick. I want that baby. And I think until Christians can actually start fighting for those babies that are already here, we have a big uphill battle.
And fighting for those moms.
Yes, yeah.
Not only would we be willing to raise your child, but we'd be willing to step in and so that you can walk with you as you raise your child. Yeah. So that's a different, you're saying there's more to this conversation than just we are pro-life and anti-abortion. Yeah. We're also going to be pro-life on a bigger level. Yeah.
And I think we have to, you're right. I think we have to walk alongside women. And I think we have to look at a world where, and this is kind of a sensitive topic, but I think we have to look at a world where in the olden days, pre-Roe versus Wade, we would have women struggle with infertility, and then they would go and adopt babies because they couldn't get pregnant. Now we have women who struggle with infertility go and get fertility treatment and have their own babies, and then what happens to those babies if they're not in this, if they're still in the system? And so I think there's some conversations to be had around fertility too.
Are you talking about what happens to those embryos?
Well, I think there's so many conversations to have because I think, so first of all, you have First of all, you have women who used to adopt who are no longer adopting because fertility treatments are available to them. So that's a problem in and of itself. I mean, maybe it's not a problem, but it's something we have to talk about if we're talking about
and it's a
change in the world, right? I mean, it's a change post Roe versus Wade. It's a change that the world has seen that we haven't unpacked yet, that we haven't actually as Christians had conversations around yet. Where what are we doing as Christians having fertility treatments when they're still babies? And in a post-Roe versus Wade being overturned world that we're fighting for, dreaming of, voting for, who's going to take all those babies if Christians are going and getting fertility treatments, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that is a conversation that needs to be had. And beyond that, I mean,
that's a hard conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
There's people who are sweating right now.
Absolutely. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry because I know how sensitive it is. And, and my husband and I walked through it. And we didn't meet each other and get married until we were in our late 30s. So I'm 41 now. We got married when I was 36, and we immediately had to start having those conversations, right? Because it was like, okay, we know we're a pro-life couple, right? We know, and pro-life in the ways I've just unpacked.
Right.
Meaning that I know there are lives out there that need to be taken care of, loved, raised, right? And so the options that felt available to us with that worldview were quite different than what, with that Christian pro-life worldview of what are the lives out there that need life right now, versus, I just want to get pregnant and I want to have a baby that looks like us. And, and I think there's just a lot to unpack there.
There's a lot, yeah. And it's a good conversation. It's worth having.
I think so.
And I don't think we're having it.
It's not being talked about. I mean, I remember one time like hearing a testimony from a stage at a church of a couple that was infertile, and then they went and did in vitro and they got their miracle baby. And I was like, well, that's great. But what about like all the babies that don't have homes? Because I remember growing up when my mom's friend Joy couldn't get pregnant, she adopted 2 babies. And like that was their miracle story, and that was their redemption story. And so if every couple that's infertile in the church just goes default, I'm going to go do in vitro, or I'm going to go do fertility treatments, what's going to happen to all those babies? Because, I mean, who's going to adopt them?
Yeah.
Because if the church is not adopting, who's going to adopt? Because we're called to. The rest of the world is not called to. But we're called to. Like, Scripture says, like, care for the widows and the orphans. And so there are orphans that need to be adopted. And that was an interesting journey for us, because when we hit that point where we got married and we did the thing married couples do.
What is it?
Oh,
the thing? Okay, I know.
Oh, okay, yeah. So we did that thing, and babies didn't come immediately, and we immediately got into those conversations. We looked into adoption really quickly. I thought, with the values I have, there are kids in foster care, drug babies that are going to need our help.
Yeah.
And I felt called to that. I was like, we're going to adopt. This is great. I know where we're going. And we immediately started fielding different applications and got denied by every single option.
Because you were denied by every single option because of
my criminal background.
Because of your criminal background.
Because of my criminal background. Wow. And so, which is fine. I think those protections are in place for a reason.
For sure.
And so there was like a little part of me that was like, I mean, I think I'd make a great foster mom. I think I'd make a great adoptive mom, but I also understand those protections and am for them.
Sure. Okay, you're going through this journey.
Yeah.
You get denied.
We get denied.
I know you have a baby.
You do.
I do. Okay, but wait, we're gonna take a break. And when we get back, we're gonna find out about Holly and Jeff's journey to their sweet baby girl.
The word sanctuary conjures different feelings in each of us. For you, that might be a spot in nature, maybe a place in your home or in your garden. For me, it's the marble pillars and stained glass windows of the old cathedrals in Europe. But for women who've escaped the horrors of trafficking, violence, and addiction, finding sanctuary can feel impossible. In February of 2001, I escaped that life. And as a survivor myself, I know firsthand how difficult that transition can be. This is why I created Sanctuary Project. A survivor-run, nonprofit social enterprise employing and empowering women coming out of trafficking, violence, and addiction. Every handmade jewelry piece provides economic opportunity to women in transition. And each of our pieces is made to inspire sanctuary in you too. You can make a difference in the lives of trafficking survivors. Whether it's through your purchases, our Sponsor a Survivor program, or even just spreading the word. Valuable lives are being healed, transformed, and given the opportunity to find sanctuary.
Okay, we're back with my friend Holly Hayes, and she was just telling us about her and her husband Jeff's journey towards parenthood and how you were denied at all of these adoption agencies because of your criminal background.
Yeah.
Didn't you want to be like, look at me now?
I did. There was a part of me that was like, oh, you're missing out. Like, I'd be the best mom for these kids. But there was another part of me that was like, okay, Lord, like, what is it then? Because I know I'm called to be a mom, and I know I'm called to do it differently. I knew He had a redemption story for us. After 5 abortions and it taken forever for me to find my husband, I knew there was a redemption story in there. And, if there's one thing I've learned about God in the last 20 years, it's that He makes beautiful things out of our messes and out of our ashes. And so every time I hit a no or a closed door in anything in life, I'm always like, okay, Lord, I'm listening. What's next?
Yeah.
Where do you want me to go?
What happened next with you guys?
So I started doing research into different forms of adoption, and I came across something I had never heard of before. It was called embryo adoption. And what I learned was that when couples do in vitro, which I've had these convictions about, where I was like, why are people in the church doing this, right? But
and that was never on the table for you guys?
No, I knew.
Because of your conviction.
Yeah, I just personally, and nothing against anyone who's done it. Many people I love have done it, but I just felt this conviction that there were babies that needed a home, and that until every baby has a home, I'm not going to go make more babies. And I even felt that way about us getting pregnant. Like, I was sort of hoping I wouldn't. We kept doing the thing married people do.
Good, I'm glad.
But
Yeah.
I was hoping that He had a different path for us, because I just knew that there were babies that needed homes. What I didn't know was that when couples do in vitro, often they'll make like 20 embryos or 7 embryos, and then they only transfer 1 or 2. And what I had always understood about that process is that when they have those leftover embryos, that those are just discarded, that you could donate them to science, or that they're just thrown away.
And that's true?
It is. It has been historically.
Okay.
And I, being pro-life, that doesn't sit well with me. I understand couples having to make a very difficult choice in that scenario, but those are life, right? I mean,
pro-life would mean that
life begins at conception, right? And so whether you're conceived in a petri dish in a doctor's office or conceived in a womb, that's when life happens, right? And so that's never sat well with me. And what I ended up coming across in my research of adoption was an opportunity to adopt embryos from other couples who had done in vitro and had leftover embryos. I learned that day that there are more than 1 million embryos frozen in cryobanks all over the world. Sorry. And I felt God's heart for them. And I felt so overwhelmed that there's all these lives just sitting in cryobanks and just waiting to come to the earth. And many of them never, ever will. But it just broke my heart. My heart broke. And I learned they're called Snowflake babies.
Okay.
And Jeff came home that day, and I was in a puddle of tears, and I couldn't even speak barely. And I said, they call them Snowflake babies. And I started telling him, and he looked at me and he said, this is how God wants to redeem your abortions, isn't it? And it was the single most beautiful moment in our marriage, because I knew that this was the story he had for us, that I would get to adopt babies at the very same stage that I destroyed them. And I knew that this was what we were called to. There were so many wonderful things about it, so many gifts in it that I never would have expected. It felt like this whole other pro-life conversation that needed to be had. And I felt like this is an opportunity for us not only to become parents and to make a family at 36, 37, 38, 40, however,
whatever it would be.
Yeah, but an opportunity for us to actually start having some of these conversations, that her little life, that his little life, that whoever was coming, their little life could be a spark of a conversation about fertility and about fertility medicine and about pro-life and about the pro-life movement and about the church, and how do we live this out responsibly, and how do we give life to all of God's creation. So we adopted 5 embryos, which was like so perfect because you
had 5 abortions.
Yeah. And we met this family online. It was kind of like an online dating thing where you
met the family.
We had to like create like a little profile, and then like they had a profile, and we had to like wink at each other. It was super awkward, but it was
5
so
embryos
sweet.
from one couple.
From one couple.
Okay.
And we were we just sort of all immediately knew. I mean, they had an egg donor, and her name was Holly, and she was like this bubbly blonde writer, and it was like, I mean, we were just like, whoa. And then the sperm came from the husband, and he was like a tall engineer named Joe, and like, I mean, it was like us, It was just hilarious. We were so blown away. All of us were so blown away by what God was doing, and I was so afraid to tell them about my past and about my life, but they got to hear that story and immediately felt the same way Jeff did, where this is God's redemption story. He has for you guys.
And there's 5.
So we transferred the first one in December. We were pregnant immediately. And so we have a little daughter now, our little Snowflake baby, our daughter Havana, who was born July 25th of 2019.
2019.
Yeah. And she has little frozen brothers and sisters. So I don't know, I got so sick, so I don't know what we're going to do. You might need to have them for me.
I haven't done having babies, but I did not know about the 5.
Yeah. So she still has little siblings that are just waiting for life.
Yeah.
And so that's been an interesting conversation too, to try to figure out what do we do with how sick I got. I got severe preeclampsia, and so and I'm 41. I'm so old now. I don't know if I can do it again. But what's amazing about embryo adoption and embryo donation is we can donate them to another couple. And so for couples that are struggling with infertility, here's this other option where, for lack of a better word, where you're not adding to the problem.
Yeah.
Where you can actually adopt these babies that have been just waiting for life. In the same way a foster kid would be waiting for a family. Havana was just waiting for life.
We have, this, but I have 3 kids through adoption. 4 total, but 3 kids through adoption. And we've been talking to our kids about adoption forever.
Yeah.
How is this for you and Jeff? What does that look like for conversations with Havana about this?
We're starting now with just letting her know her story is special. I'm so excited to share some of the dreams I've actually had about her. I've had 2 dreams that were so sweet, where she, in the first one, she was singing the ABCs to me, and she was a tiny baby. She was like 4 months old or something at the time. And we were in the car, and she was in the back seat, and she was singing the ABCs, but she was 4 months old. And I turned back to her, and I said, Havana, how do you know how to sing your ABCs? And she said, because I'm really 7, Mom. And I was like, what do you mean? And she said, I was made 7 years ago. And this was in a dream.
Is that true?
Yes. And this did not occur to me. I'm telling you, this did not occur to me in my conscious mind ever, that my daughter is actually 7 years old, even though she's, but her spiritual age, right? I mean, the day that she was created by God and became
was 7 years ago.
Was 7 years ago. I mean, I have chills just thinking about this, because, I think, this is it's mind blowing, right? But I really do believe that she got her spirit and her life in that moment. And so what an interesting story for her.
Very interesting.
What an interesting journey for her to understand, wow, you were made all this time ago, and then mommy and dad daddy adopted you, and then you got to grow in mommy's tummy, and then, you know, and here you are in the world. And, you know, I don't think I would ever want her to know that she could have been discarded, but I do want her to know that her story is special, and that, you know, and that she is, that she's a miracle.
Yeah.
And that there are other babies like her, because this problem's not going away.
Yeah.
If there's 1 million right now, and think about all the people who are getting fertility treatments daily, if there's 1 million frozen right now, how many are there going to be in 3 years and 5 years by the time she's an adult?
Yeah.
And so I would hope that there are other families that would choose this, you know, and not even like as a backup choice. We got to the point where we were like, we're choosing this first choice. We started using birth control because we were like,
this is it. This is how we're going to build our family.
This is our first choice way to build our family.
Well, Holly, I love, because you said earlier that you've seen God in all of your life, and God makes beautiful things out of our mess, out of the world's mess, out of broken things. Like, God is in the business of making things beautiful. And you're doing that through your organization with the women that work for you. You're doing that with your family. You're doing that with conversations like this of just helping us see things. So thank you so much for joining us. Guys, thank you for being here today. And thank you, Holly, once again, for sharing your story. That is a wrap. Season 1 of the Jamie Ivey Show is in the books. It is done. It was so much fun. This has been a dream of mine forever, and we did it. Don't worry, we're not stopping now. Season 2 will be back this year. You do not want to miss it. Make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. We did it!